Well, welcome in, everybody. Thank you so much for joining for today's conversation called Rest is Resistance. We're honored to have Jawanza with us today, a leader who not only champions leadership development through programs like MEDI and MECA in the multicultural leadership development space, but also reminds us of the power that we hold and including reclaiming rest as a form of resistance and renewal. So, super short intro because I want us to have plenty of time to hear from Jawanza, but I will turn it over to you now. Thanks, Jawanza.
Of course, thanks for having me. I'm a giant book nerd, so this is really just me giving you all a wonderful summary for a wonderful book with some tools that may help you in the world that we operate in. So I'm excited to be here with all of you. It's great to see a lot of familiar faces. I will not be talking at you the whole time because that would be boring. So there'll be opportunities for you all to share in the chat, for you to share aloud. And for those of you who are sharing aloud, there might even be a little raffle at the end of this. So we are excited to have you all on with us. And the overview for the day, so that way you're not going to be caught off by any surprises, is as such. So we'll do a little introduction, both of myself and to Rest. We'll be talking a bit about community agreements, and then we'll be talking and holding space to discuss Rest as a group, where to start with Rest, and then to dive into the overview of the book, do another exercise, and then to do some fun closing activities. So it's going to be a enjoyable 45 minutes. We may not get to everything, and that is absolutely okay. But I really want to make sure that you have a chance to reflect for yourself, to ask questions, to dialogue, and to make sure that this space is a safe place for you to be. So we'll be turning the recording off and on a few times to give you all sort of vulnerability and anonymity. But we do want to share out the resources to our subgroup. So just an FYI, if you hear the stop recording, that's just what that's from. So to introduce myself, again, I'm Jawanza Barrio Lumumba from YMCA of the USA. Again, a giant book nerd. I love to read all different kind of things, and I love to bring them into our Y space because a lot of times we are honestly on the go a lot and we don't have a chance to slow down. And when we do have a chance to slow down and there's really interesting nuggets, I love to bring them into spaces like this, into learning groups, into wherever I can share them out. So that way you can take away some little learnings, but also maybe dive into a book or two. And so you'll be seeing me less as a senior manager and more as a book lover today. But as we go into this conversation, it's important for us to even consider and introduce ourselves to rest as a whole concept. And so, really, as I'm introducing myself and sharing my own story and relationship with rest and also exhaustion, I would love to hear from all of you in the chat as well. So, as I'm talking, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, share the last time that you made the conscious effort to rest for yourself and share what your overall comfort with rest is. So it's a lot. You don't have to rush through it as I'll be talking for a few minutes. But I want to share a little bit about my own relationship with rest, where it started, how it's changed, and where I am with it now. So obviously, we all started with rest when we were just a little guy, when we were young, when we would take naps, and really rest was facilitated by our families to ensure that, we weren't up in the middle of the night. But we also, as we got to grow older, we would have nap time and rest time. And a thing that was really so incorporated into our day that as we got older, say as we get to our teen eras, starts to fade away because we're constantly kind of just overloaded with things. We are focusing in school, we're focusing on not extraterrestrials, but extracurriculars. We're focusing in on our friends, we're focusing on trying to get into the next school, college, to do all of these things to get a job. And so our world shifts greatly as we go from the sort of young person who has rest embedded into their life, into their day, to a young person who's really sort of being overloaded and given a lot more to do. And it's really the first time that we start to feel a little bit burnout or to start dealing with what we're going to talk a little bit more about, which is grind culture. So we see that transition from young us to teenage us. This is me college graduate, and surviving what I would call 4 years of intensive grind culture. I love school. I love college. College, though, pushed me to have to do a lot of work in a way that I reflect back now, and I was like, that wasn't necessarily the healthiest approach to have to stay up until 2 in the morning working on essays, waking up at 5 a.m. reading, and it gets a lot done, and there's a lot of productivity around it, and there's a lot of great learnings, but that healthy practice of like a balance, a work-life balance, and just that sort of idea wasn't necessarily there. We graduated and we celebrated, but a lot of it was us celebrating that sort of habit. And then we find ourselves in the workforce. And for myself, I was working at the Y before college, during college, and still now. And a lot of my like habits and efforts, I found myself carrying them over from college into the workplace. And I work for the Y. I work for YUSA now, but a lot of my work has connections to staff who are from vulnerable communities. And so there's a lot of pressure that gets put into us as Y employees, especially with concepts like we're civil servants. We need to make sure that we're always supporting efforts and always helping. There's a lot of pressure for us to kind of constantly be on the go. And there's a reality that that's sort of not just the why, it's a lot of nonprofits, a lot of workplaces, that sort of grind culture leads to more of a burnout culture where we keep pushing, and then we eventually have to stop either due to like injury, exhaustion, and a variety of other things. And I've experienced a lot of that, and it can be fueled by things like fear of losing your job, fear of not getting a promotion, and you have all this underlying fear that really helps to promote and push us through that burnout culture. And as many of us know, especially who were here before 2020, this then kind of erupted and exploded when we had our work from home lockdown experience because we suddenly were forced to stop. We were suddenly have to rethink how we were doing our work. Not all of us shifted to this model, but for all of us at YUSA, we went from going to an office or traveling for work to just being at home, which forced us to slow down. But then we found new ways to get busy again. And all of a sudden, we would have days from 8 a.m. till almost like 6 p.m. at night where we would be scheduled with meetings without an ability to stop, to pause, reflect, and to check in on ourselves, and to even have a moment to just pause for ourselves. We were constantly needing to support everybody, and it hit a point where, again, burnout became real, where boundaries were dissolving, and we found ourselves not having great practices as it came to rest, especially in relationship to our job. In 2022, I think in 2021, I was introduced to some concepts of virtual journaling and some of our virtual communities that we still had. And I started getting connected with people from outside the Y that were practicing journaling in community and hosting events. And I took a lot of time in 2022 to actually pause and reflect on how I was feeling. I had started to put in some boundaries at work of like, I can't be in meetings all day. I need to like be able to do the work that I need to do. But I also realized that that was just creating more structures around productivity, and I was losing a lot of like connection with myself, with my community, and with my friends. And so a big emphasis of 2022 and 2023 were really pausing for myself and thinking of what I needed to do for me in order to actually be rejuvenated because I was extremely depleted by the end of 2022. And so I started going to events, I started doing journaling, and I found myself being able to um, reconnect with myself in a way that it hadn't been possible for a while because I was backing away from this burnout, grind culture, and really checking in with myself, going to spaces that were meant to cultivate that. And similar to what you're doing today by showing up here, I started making time for myself to actually understand how I was feeling and to pause and rest in different ways. And that leads to when I read Rest is Resistance, which was leading up to a big trip that I took to Peru with a group that's focusing on journaling and rest. And so it was a great preamble. And I have been giving this book to people left and right, and really feel like it's a great opportunity to reflect. So before we go into our community agreements, I just want to say thank you for everyone who is sharing in the chat. I'm seeing a lot of great responses, especially around Let's see. Do, do, do. Folks are very comfortable with rest. Folks took a little extra hour for themselves today. Balance is important. Absolutely. There's guilt sometimes with rest, and that's something that we've been working on. Absolutely. And that we try our best not to respond to emails after sex with great boundaries in order to connect with family. So there's a lot in the chat. Definitely take a chance to read them if you can. And we're going to have a chance to sort of examine our own relationship with rest. This is mine. I'm a storyteller. So thank you for indulging my pictures that I dug up from Facebook and one meme. But this is just my relationship with rest and how it's changed over the years. And so a lot of times people just say, change your habits, do X, Y, and Z. It's a relationship that we have with rest and it changes over time. And we have to be able to push ourselves and find what works best for us and not always what is the best for other people. So before we go forward, I do want to share some community agreements because these are always important for us to reflect as we engage in a space like this, especially a collaborative one. So we always want to remember our core why values are caring, respect, responsibility, and honesty. Lean into active listening. We want to also ask questions to understand, not to necessarily challenge people's perspective. What's 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 shared here stays here, what's learned here leaves here. It allows us to maintain confidentiality, but to also take some lessons. We may challenge ourselves a little bit to lean into discomfort because that's oftentimes where healing, growth, and change unfolds. We want to contribute to the collective space and make sure we're making space for others to contribute to, which I'll do the same. I won't be talking the whole time. It's always okay to slow down and to take a little bit of time for yourself. And we'll continue to return to this one, but rest is for yourself. It's not for productivity. And so we're going to dive into that a bit more, but are there any other community agreements that people want to speak into the space? You can either drop it in the chat or say it aloud. All right. Then we are going to shift into our first discussion. As I said, I'm not talking the entire time. So we really want you to take some of what you just shared in the chat and what you've been reflecting on and to bring into this space and to bring into this group these questions. You can answer one, you can answer some, you can answer however sort of speaks to you. But we'd love to hear a little bit about what your relationship is with rest. A number of you shared in the chat. So if you're feeling empowered to share that aloud, or if you want to talk a little bit about your journey, we'd love to hear that. How did you learn to rest? And how did resting as an adult change? And what rest practices do you currently have? This wonderful sort of framing of where we can start when it comes to rest practices. These are just a few. There are many more, but thinking about some of these may help you if you're sort of starting on your journey or you're revisiting or revising your journey with rest to explore some different opportunities. The first is detoxing from social media. There's a lot out there, be it Facebook, Snapchat, Instagram, all the different sort of things that may offer information and connection, but we oftentimes may find ourselves sort of engulfed in it or doom scrolling or sort of feeling more exhausted just by being in it. And some of that has to do with like how social media was designed and how it was designed to be consumed in mass. And so we sometimes have to find a way to sort of pull back from that and to take more control of how we engage with it because it can be preventing our rest. It may be the first thing you look at when you wake up. It may be the last thing you look at before you go to bed. So starting to wean off or get a little distance from social media may be a great place to start. Exploring and naming healing from some of our trauma is a great way for us to be able to start utilizing our favorite two-letter word, which is no. We oftentimes will say yes and keep pushing to keep doing things, and that may, as I shared before, have some underlying trauma relations. So, like for me, I've been like released from the Y before. I've had demotions. I got furloughed. All the fun things have happened to me from the Y, which has an underlying stress of like I could lose my job at any moment, which I don't have as much of, but I did understand earlier in my career that that fueled a lot of my push to keep working in order to prove myself and to escape from that fear, which isn't actually how that works. And so starting to think about what some of our underlying traumas, some of our underlying fears or anxieties may be will help us to find a way to say no, to step away from them. Um, Practicing daily practices such as daydreaming is wonderful. Daydreaming doesn't have to be full knocked out of sleep, but it could be doodling, it could be journaling. It gives you space to be reimagining in whatever way you could be doing it. There's not always going to be quick fixes to things. Sometimes we do, and they're not always the best. But we also have to accept that sometimes we have to slow down instead of trying to find the quick fix. We have, as we talked about, taken in some practices that are a bit harmful that we've either experienced and internalized that we sometimes try to pass on to others. And so, as we get some of that self awareness, there's an opportunity for us to unlearn and sort of reprogram ourselves to be thinking about what our initial responses may be, but what do I actually want to put back into the world and how do I want to practice this myself? Pausing, there's so much beauty in slowing down and just pausing for a moment. It can allow you a chance to sort of recollect yourself, but it also gives you a chance to see a lot of things that we sometimes miss as we're speeding through the world. Taking a moment to listen more. All of you are on right now doing that, so we see you and we see you already on this journey and road to practice. But finding other places that you can slow down to pause and listen more will help. Exhaustion is not productivity, even though sometimes we push ourselves because we know that we need to prove ourselves or to do X, Y, and Z. And truthfully, productivity should not be a direct correlation with exhaustion. We can be productive and not deplete ourselves. So, starting to understand your own relationship with exhaustion and how you want to start exploring that with productivity. Know that you're enough just the way you are, and that sometimes when we push ourselves to exhaustion, we're trying to prove something, and know that you don't need to prove that you are enough. And we get to have a chance to find and create systems of community care. Finding people in this group right now who you may have resonating with their story is a great way to even start this practice, but thinking about who you have community with and the systems you can build within your why at home and in your community will really be a great way to lean into people so you don't feel isolated and alone. So the book Rest is Resistance is a magnificent book written by Tricia Hersey, who is the founder of the Nap Ministry, which I'll talk a little bit more about in a moment. But the book Rest is Resistance is available everywhere and is a great resource that we're going to summarize and highlight some tools from. Really, you could have a whole workshop on each of the sort of sections of Rest is Resistance, but we're doing a quick sort of high level version of this so that way you all can sort of understand some key tools and then potentially explore some more yourselves. But Tricia built this book around her work that she does with the Nap Ministry. The Nap Ministry is a primarily, there's a few links that we'll share at the end, but there's an Instagram page, which is where she does most of her work, and a website and a few other places and spaces. But the idea of the Nap Ministry sort of comes from these four key tenets, which are that rest is a form of resistance, because if it disrupts and pushes back against what we call like burnout culture or grind culture, then it's a form of resistance because rest is disrupting all these things that we've been told to believe that we need to keep going, that ultimately we need to keep working until we're exhausted and burnout, and that's not true. So rest is a form of resistance. Our bodies are a site of liberation. So as we resist, then we have a chance to reconnect with our bodies to be able to remind ourselves of the beautiful vessels that we are in the place and space of dreaming and imagination that our bodies can actually activate. Our bodies can do physical work, which is great. And it can create productivity, which is great for the things you're trying to produce, but that's not our sole purpose for being in the world. And so, as we remember that, and as we are able to do things that allow us to create, to allow us to dream, and to allow us to innovate in the world, and not just for productivity's sake, but for the sake of us as people, that allows us to remind ourselves that our bodies are a site of liberation. Naps are portal to imagine, invent, and heal. Our minds are a complex and beautiful place. And it could be when they're conscious, it could be when they're daydreaming, it can be while it's observing things on a walk. But our mind, when we don't allow it space to be able to rest and to dream and to imagine, then we're sort of smothering it a bit, and we're losing access and our connection to the space that Tricia refers to as our dream space. She mentions that it's stolen because that's what ultimately happens when our whole self gets devoted to burnout culture and grind culture, and rest is our way to reclaim it. And so these are sort of the four key concepts that she works through for all of her work. And it gets highlighted in Rest is Resistance because they then direct and sort of steer the four components of her manifesto that we'll dive into in a minute. But before we do, because if I was just talking at you all the whole time and not allowing you any space to pause and rest, I feel like I would be missing the whole point of this workshop. So I'm going to offer us a brief moment to pause and to reflect on a meditation that is from the book. So take a moment to sort of get yourself in a comfortable place. Stretch out a little bit if you need to. Get some water if water needs to be poured into your body because we also don't hydrate enough. That could be its own book. But we're going to have me read this rest meditation for just a moment. So sit in a chair with your back upright and your feet firmly planted on the floor. Recline in a chair or on a bed or on a couch, in a hammock if you happen to be hammocking, or on the floor. Scan your body and recognize any tension within it. As you do, breathe deep and imagine a world without limits. Inhale deeply from your belly. Hold for 4 seconds. And exhale slowly. We're going to repeat that 2 more times. Scan your body and recognize any tension within it. Breathe deep and imagine a world without limits. Inhale deeply from your belly. Hold for 4 seconds. And exhale slowly. Breathe deep. Imagine a world without limits. Inhale deeply from your belly. Hold for 4 seconds. Exhale slowly. The book has a number of different meditations, of poems, innovations, and of invocations, innovative invocations, if you will, that allow you to be able to pause, rest, and reset. And so much of our day, we find ourselves just going, going, going. And we may not actually have a moment to do that rest unless there's a lunch break, which sometimes we miss those designated lunch breaks. Sometimes we have to if we may find ourselves a little injured, or if something miraculously gets canceled. But there's ways for us to build a little bit more intentionality around it, so that way we can find rest making its way into our day. So in the book, there are 4 sections of her manifesto. And the first one is rest. The next one is dream. The third is resist. And the fourth is imagine. And I am written these as are captured in the book because she specifically highlights them to be capitalized and with an exclamation point because we need to be really emphasizing the importance and the significance of each one of these. So rest, there's really an opportunity to remind ourselves some key points with rest. really remembering why we rest, and it's not for productivity. Rest is to listen to your body and to say that this is what my body is needing right now, and I'm going to listen to it. Um, the magic of how we rest is that there's a variety of different ways for how we can rest. Naps are great. Love a nap. We can't always nap, but sometimes our body's also calling us to do more than just lie down and sleep. Sometimes our body is calling us to do a variety of different things. I myself love to go on walks when I can because walking is a great way for me to go outside, stretch my legs, and to listen to my body. It doesn't need to be an aggressive run. It could just be a stroll down to like the waterfront, and for me to either do some reading there or to just sort of listen to some music and sort of start my day there. I also love to do a little bit of stretching in the morning. It's also a good way to sort of like check in with my body to see where any sort of just like key points might be, and for me to be able to address that as well. I'm also a writer, and I dip into journaling as well. So finding times for me to, before I like dive into my day, to sort of just pause and check in with myself. I play a little bit of music and either do some reflective journaling. I sometimes journal my dreams if I have a very fun or significant dream. And then I also find myself at a cafe with some instrumental music going and working on a story that I'd like to tell. So rest for me looks different in a variety of different ways. But I captured these from the book. These are not necessarily my all of my things that I do, but rest can look very different for different people. And how we decide to rest is truly up to who we are and how our body is sort of calling to us. And so I want to ask, and I have this in the chat, but we can also hear from folks aloud too. What does rest look like for you? How do you decide to rest? And I guess thinking about why these are important for you for opportunities for rest. So you can either drop these in the chat, or if anyone would like to hop off mute, we also could do that as well. Oh, and thank you for putting all the resources in the chat already. Thank you. I appreciate that. Sound baths are amazing. Yes.
Can you hear me, Joanna?
Oh yeah, take it away.
Hi, how are you?
So as we dream, we then have an opportunity to think differently. And as we mentioned before, dreams have kind of been hijacked from our productivity, burnout, and grind culture in a way that doesn't always allow us to dream and to be creative. And a great example, an easy example, is this workshop. So we were originally going to do this, I think, a month ago. And I was like, oh, I can throw something together in a few days because I had gotten a little bit busy with things that were happening at work. And that would have been a very different workshop than we're experiencing now. But instead, Ellie gave me a whole month to be able to stop, slow down, and to rethink things. And that allowed me to think about what would be the best use of time for us together? How could this be done intentionally? How could I rethink and redream? I had like a shower right before this, and I made some quick changes before we started. It allows us space to be able to not try to rush just to get something done, because when we do that, sometimes our dreams are just going to be whatever we can assemble versus what creatively can really speak to how we want things to come together. And so as we think about dreaming, there's not going to be a way that I can prescribe for you to how you should dream, but as you get to slow down a little bit, you get to discover your own techniques for dreaming. But there are some ways to be creating spaces to dream for yourself. And some of them include the kind of community that you're keeping, and to cultivate one that does have a deep vulnerable authenticity so people can be real and honest and not sort of have it be a little bit closed off, to invent spaces of joy, freedom, and rest. And sometimes that can just be as simple as laying down and then seeing what your mind allows you to create. That could be meditation, that could be yoga, that can be napping. It could be a variety of different things. It could be sitting up by the waterfront and hearing the waves as they lap by you. Give yourself space to wander at your own pace. So sometimes we're just like on the move. Sometimes we're like unaware how fast of a walker we are. Sometimes we're just scrolling through life. And I think Ferris Bueller told us to slow down or else we're going to miss what's around us. So take that to heart, because there is an opportunity for us to sort of wander and let paths find us instead of just being on the path that others have prescribed for us to be running down. So slow down for yourself. Also, rest by slowing down. Rest is a secret. Rest in the open, rest without your phone, and then rest as if your life depends on it, because we do want to really think about how this technique can really help us be more connected to ourselves, our body, and our imagination. And just because of time, I'm going to keep going. And just to share that this third part, to resist, is important because, oh, we have 1 minute. Okay. To resist is to allow ourselves to really fight some of these systems that we regularly operate in. A lot of that is going to be productivity that we have been sort of infused with, and we need to grant ourselves permission to say no, to really address that some of these systems are oppressive and that we need to be fighting against things that we've been told and normalized in order for our bodies to be able to be at rest and to be at ease and to create and imagine. Um, there are a lot of other wonderful things that we can sort of activate, but as we think about imagination, imagination is the fourth component, and that allows us to envision in the future. Harriet Tubman is a great example of this, someone who started off as an enslaved person, but she imagined a future and brought it into action and did not limit herself to what is sometimes just right in front of her, because she created space for herself to be able to rest, dream, resist, and then imagine a future that others were free. So as we sometimes get lost in the inability to imagine beyond our immediate circumstances, slowing down, pausing, dreaming, and resisting that is what's going to allow us to be able to imagine the better future that we want for ourselves. So there's a little bit more to this, but I'm going to pause because I believe we are at time, and just sort of gift a thank you to all of you. We will offer like a deck version of this so that way you can review over it and see some of the more details that are in this. But thank you for being here and for prioritizing rest right now, because we need it. We need it as a way to imagine, to resist, to dream, and just to be. So that way we're able to reconnect a bit more with ourselves. So I'm going to stop and pause and just offer that thank you to all of you again, and for this space that you allowed me to nerd out in with all of you. So thank you.
I'll just gift back the thank you. I think I can speak for all of us that this could have gone on for 3 hours and felt great. So thank you so much, Joanza, for giving us some thoughts to center on as we're prioritizing our journey toward rest if we're not there already. I hope that this is a good place of community for everybody. And I'm just really grateful that you all are part of this work. And I hope that it spreads beyond this call. I'll be posting the recording to the link post and anything else that Joanza would like me to send along as well. But thank you all.
Yeah. For any of you who shared aloud, we're going to put you into a little raffle, and we'll email you later to a chance to win the book and or the rest deck that they also have as well. So thank you all for being here, and I'll be on for a minute if you have any questions.
Thank you.